Should you back Among Cultists? This isn't a game I'll be adding to my collection, and I think it'll be the same for you unless you've got a very specific type of gaming group. But before I tell you why, my name is Sam, this is Should You Back It, and I'm here to help you crowdfund with confidence. Among Cultists is a social deduction game for 48 players that's going to take you about 45 to 90 minutes to complete, and at the moment the core pledge for this game will set you back quite a reasonable £44 or $53. At the start of the game, you're going to be assigned a role in secret, whether that be a cultist, an investigator, or the seer, and each role has a different objective. The investigators will be trying to traverse the game board, earning points by collecting books. The cultists will be trying to secretly kill off 4 of those investigators and maybe even hinder the investigators' work along the way. The way they do that is relatively simple. You see, outside each room in the game is a little stack of cards. In order for the investigators to secure a book, they'll shuffle the deck of cards that is linked to that room and draw one. Each player will have a curated deck of cards based on who they are. The investigators have relatively positive cards with success cards. The cultists, as you can expect, may not have so many nice success cards in their deck. And when a player enters a room, they can take an action to place one of their cards face down if they choose. Once there's 3, a room is explored and players can then take an action to draw one of those cards. If it's a success card, the book is secured. If it's a fail, it's a fail, and there are equally some sabotage cards that can be slipped in there for even more catastrophic results. Now, I believe the game starts with 1 card in each room, so there is an element of randomness that could mean there are some negative cards in there by default that weren't placed by a cultist, just to throw you off a little, so it's harder to figure out who put what where. The game equally has an ominous sounding pulse system. In essence, every player will have some cards face down in front of them that will tell them whether they are alive or dead. When players cross paths in a room or a corridor, you'll trade a pulse card. As you can expect, the investigators only have alive cards, the cultists have dead cards shuffled in with their deck, and these can be passed to an investigator, in essence meaning that they kill them. What is interesting about this mechanic is that if I give you a dead card, you don't know immediately about it. This can only be discovered if another investigator decides to do a pulse check on you, where they'll draw a random one of your pulse cards to see if you're still alive. Again, this is important because if the cultists kill 4 players, they win. I find this to be a really strange mechanic, which I don't think I like. The fact players could be walking around without knowing they're dead is just a little strange. There are quite a few other rules like power and movement patterns, but I don't normally get into the nitty-gritty of gameplay here and Should You Back It. Instead, if you want to see a great video that breaks down the gameplay, I'm going to link you to one in the top right from Becca over at Good Time Society. Instead, let's do a risk assessment on the company behind this game. You see, whenever we back something on Kickstarter or any crowdfunding platform, it's always important to do some research on the company and see how their past projects went, see how they handled everything, just to get a sense of what our experience could be as a backer. You see, Among Cultists is being made by Godot Games. This is their 4th Kickstarter campaign, and all of their campaigns have actually been social deduction titles from what I can tell. So for me, there is something encouraging about the fact that they've found their niche and their passion and are really leaning into that. Beyond that, all of their games have shipped, with their latest title, Human Punishment: The beginning to arrive with backers in September of 2022. Going through their past Kickstarters, backers seem to, on the whole, have had a positive experience. There are quite a few comments in their last Kickstarter, The Beginning, where people have been complaining about a lack of communication when they've emailed the company with queries or refund requests. However, I would always take these types of comments with a pinch of salt on Kickstarter. Comments like this are very common in Kickstarter comment threads and aren't always indicative of communication from the company. Just as a side note as well, the games that Godot Games have released are averaging around a 7.5 rating on Board Game Geek, if that sways you as well. On the whole, they have delivered their Kickstarters, they post updates at least once a month on their projects, and they seem like a young company that's really working hard to carve out a niche for themselves. So all in all, I would give Godot Games a green light for this risk assessment. Should you back this game though? For me, this isn't a game I'll be adding to my collection. For a start, you need a minimum of 4 players to play this game. Initial feedback from reviewers and testers seems to suggest that 5 to 8 players is the ideal, and that means that this game wouldn't get to see the table very often if it was in my collection. If you equally have a small game group, this is something to seriously consider. What's more is that I feel that when it comes to rules and gameplay, this game is perhaps a little overcomplicated for what it is, with a lengthy enough setup time and slightly bloated mechanics, especially when you take into account the source material. Now, I say that as someone who has Battlestar Galactica in their collection, so I appreciate the contradiction in what I'm saying here about setup and bloated mechanics in a social deduction game. Complication may not be the right term here. Instead, it feels like there are a lot of mechanics that don't naturally seem to flow with one another, or that seem to needlessly augment gameplay, and I worry that there's so much going on here that would make teaching this game pretty difficult. This is a game that is inspired by Among Us, a game that is, at its core, an incredibly simple social deduction game with simple mini-games built into it that equally allows traitors to use hidden vents to travel across the map and equally sabotage key areas of the map as well. That inspiration is almost unrecognisable in Among Cultists. One example adding in extra complication to the game is with movement. Now, it's entirely legal for players to move to any room they want on any turn they want, but they can't activate a room unless a card tells them they can. You see, the investigators have cards that dictate which rooms they can activate on each turn and in which order. The only player that doesn't abide by these rules is the cultists. They can enter and activate any room they want on any turn they want, and I get that this is a way to figure out who the cultist is by the rooms they go into, and it adds a level of planning for players as they chart out their movement. But I don't think this level of complexity is necessary in a game like this, or at least from what I've seen, it's not presented itself as being wholly necessary. All of this combined with the fact that, at least for my group, we'd need to be bringing in new people in order to get it to the table, means that backing this game just wouldn't make sense. If, however, you have a decently sized gaming group who love social deduction games, who are into the Cthulhu genre, and who dig playing games like Among Us or Town of Salem together, and I think this is a game you should consider, and I think the price point is really compelling, but just don't back it before you check out some gameplay first. But as always, this is my recommendation. Hopefully you feel a bit more informed. If you've found this video helpful, I would love it if you could check out this video next. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and by watching it, you'd be really helping support my channel.